Welcome, everybody, to yet another episode of Two Chaps, Many Cultures. Today, on this beautiful January 20th, we will try something new. This is an experiment. We want you to be part of this episode, and we will post a link how you can enter the studio today, as Brett and I will hash out some ideas how cultural change may be possible in cultures, specifically in the United States, which is going through yet another change of power today. So stay tuned and get ready to click that link to join us. Hey, Mike, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Doing fantastic on this beautiful sunny day, winter day here in Chicago.
In Chicago.
Yeah.
Well, it's wintry in Atlanta as well. It is sunny, not quite as cold as it is in the Midwest, I suppose. It is a beautiful day. It's a new day, a new dawn, as some might remember the lines from that very song. It is the changing of the guards in the White House and the US administration, and we decided to talk about what it takes to usher in change. There will be some changes coming for people in this country and potentially also for people around the world, as the US continues to be a force to be reckoned with, some would argue. And we decided to do a little experiment. Let's see how this goes. So first, I'm going to put a little arrow on the screen, and then I'm also going to put a link on the screen. So this link right here is how you can join the studio now if you're watching this live. Oh, if you're watching the recording 5 years from now, you wonder, what are these two dudes doing here? But if you live right now in this very moment, in January 20th of 2021, then this is the opportunity to join the studio, if you will. And we will have an arbitrary selection of people that we may allow into the studio. There might not be anyone who has the guts to do so, but we also want to make sure that we have a clickable link, and I shall do this right now as Brett takes over from me. I will post a link in the chat box underneath that hopefully is clickable for you so you can join us.
Absolutely. And if you are joining us for the very first time, you don't know who the hell we are, which is probably every chance in the world, then we are Two Chaps, Many Cultures. This is episode 138, our daily broadcast of all things cultural, the culture of business and the business of culture. And yes, this is the first time we've done this in 138 episodes, where we've just unplanned opened up the floor. If you click on the link that Christian has just put in there, then you will see that it'll direct you to our StreamYard green room, the official green room. Apologize, there are no blue M&Ms, but we will do our very best to accommodate you. If you wish to join us for a comment, a chat, just general bloviations. That's what we hear about. But we hear about change. It is a change of day. Those that have watched the changing of the guard today, and really from whatever your political leanings are or your social leanings are, I guess one would say the guardrail, as one commentator said, the guardrails held. It really did. We saw, I think, we put this in the context of change. Change has come. But I was reflecting on it and thinking, well, actually, is it so much change, or is it just a representation of what some people like the continuity of certainty, of even though that the boundaries were stretched and the guardrails were beaten and battered, the consistency that was written into the very idea of this country has basically held firm, and we have had a transition which we have seen for in this case, the 59th time that has taken place, where the transition of power has been done on this particular day anyway, peacefully, and in a certain way, which has been the traditions that have been passed down for many, many years.
And I would certainly agree that in all the rhetoric from different angles of U.S. society about good or bad, how this change should be or shouldn't be, how this change will benefit or not benefit the United States. The continuity of change is something that has followed the U.S. culture from its inception. It is a culture that is built upon fast change. It is a culture that is built upon seizing the opportunities. And today is no different. It is indeed a marker of continuity. And yet, with my personal history, not just my personal history, but also the history that I experienced as handed down as a narrative in the country that I grew up in, I would invite everyone to look at this continuum with a grain of salt, or with at least the attention to detail, and with some caution, because we just experienced, as I saw some commentators say today, the end of an era. Not the end of an era, but the end of an era, as some think of the past 4 years. I'm not taking political sides here, even though I think it's pretty clear why I stand on this. That we've seen division in the United States like we haven't seen before in most of our lifetimes. And we're here to discuss this very question here, from divided states of America to united states of America. I'm being a little bit, or we are being a little bit pointed here. How can we approach cultural change? Is cultural change something that is called for in the country, or is it not? And the cautious approach that, or the warning approach that I would plea for, is that I come from a country that failed its first attempt at democracy, which cannot be said of the United States. It's the oldest existing democracy on the planet. And yet we've seen tendencies in the United States that have rerouted a big part of the populace away from the ideals of a liberal democratic republic. And what could possibly be done to reinforce those guardrails that we're so happy that they held for the past few years? But there were moments when some of us thought, well, maybe they won't hold much longer, right? So what are some of the lessons that we can draw from other countries, from other political systems, from other cultures who have seen the strain on their guardrails, or even the collapse of their guardrails, and how do we reunite after the fact, right? That's something that I would see is, or I would say is a critical task that the country is about to go through or to tackle.
Yeah. And so you call on history. We think about history, not only the US history, but the lessons that can be learned from the history of other countries. And I didn't grow up in a country like Christians. My country is very much like the US. It's a democracy in terms of its European colonization. It has been built into a democracy that hasn't seen really the pushing of the guardrails in any way, shape, or form that we've witnessed in the last few weeks here in this country. There have been, small events, but nothing like, I think, what we've seen here. So I have the privilege of not having that memory, and so I guess I'm just throwing this out there. Is that possible for me to then guess, feel a little bit more, just as much fear and trepidation in what I see going, or what I saw going on in the last few years, because obviously I'm a father and a husband, you know. So there were women are one of these groups that I guess probably experienced a lot of fear in the last number of years, because of the way that was the permission that was given to certain treatment of women and perceptions of women. Obviously, the people of color, minorities in any way, shape, or form. That fear, again, you know, I can't experience it. I can't ever know what that's like. I don't pretend to ever know what that's like. But I think that because I've lived a very privileged life, I haven't had that fear. So I've listened to a lot. You know, we've made some posts about the upcoming Clubhouse discussion, this new app, and I spent an inordinate amount of time on it yesterday. And what it is just this audio platform is allowing people to express what they've gone through without the intimidation of and you know, obviously the biases are thrown up by the physical representation they see. And so I listened very intently last night to hours and hours and hours of people from all kinds of walks of life around the globe talking about this and reflecting on how they've processed that fear, because this is an experience for them. It's not an experience that I've had. So that was very, very insightful. And the more I listened, the more I wanted to listen. And I think that's a cultural change, perhaps, if I can suggest that people do that. It's just, and people even commented on that platform last night, people that look like me said, this is a platform that allows me to just sit and listen. And that's probably something we haven't done. I'm just as guilty as that as anybody. I'm triggered by people that I see that possibly could, you know, even if they just sat and listened a little bit more, they would see what the effect of their actions, their hatred and their vitriol has on the psyche of the people that they target. And yet they don't really seem to take pause. So it is beholden just as much on us to take pause and do the same thing. And as the new president said this morning, you know, that we become better by showing, what do you say, the strength, and not the power of our strength, or the example, right? The power, the example of our power, but the power of our example, right? So that is what I think is the best thing forward.
Well, he also appealed to the people in this country to remember how we are all neighbors. We may not always agree with each other. However, we need to rediscover the ability to listen to each other and be able to be civil with our neighbors, despite or in light of what the color of the fence is or how broad the ditch is between the two properties. I've been thinking about this a lot, because it's easy to fall into this trap of, oh no, now my president has left the office and now the country is going to hell in a handbasket, or, oh, now this president is finally gone and now we are back to the way we've always been. And I think both approaches are very myopic. They celebrate the very moment, or be more in the very moment, and sure, have at it. And yet I think what's really important for a culture of societies is what happens between these 4 years, or what happens in an everyday ongoing process. And when people like Brett and I, when we work with our clients, the talk of our clients, or the conversation with our clients, is often about how do we create or morph or massage our corporate culture in order to be more successful. And one of the answers or one of the headlines that I would like to give to our clients, and have been giving, is, if corporate culture is important to you, then you want to be intentional about it. And you don't want to let it happen to you. You want to be involved in it and allow everybody in the organization to have their part in creating that common intention. And this is something, I think, as a cultural change, to answer my answer to the question we're posing here on the bottom here, my answer is the United States society, as diverse and divergent and divided it may be at times, there's got to be skin in the game for everyone. Everybody needs to be invested in society, which means we all have to have a common level of contribution. And this is a bold suggestion, and some might reject it as being, oh, well, what are you doing here with your socialist ideas? That's not the angle that I would come from. What I would like to see in any society, whether it's the US or any other national group of people, if we have a common base, if a common value set that we adhere to. And in the US, there is something called a constitutional patriotism. No matter what religion I have or what skin color I have, I choose to live in this country because I believe in its values, right? So if I'm a part of a society, then as the member of society, I need to have a part in that. Or as the former president John F. Kennedy said, ask what you can do for your country. So the question, I think, has been forgotten a little bit, or the potential answers to that have fallen from the headlines a little bit, from the front page. So what could be potential ways every member of this culture, every member of this society can contribute to its success? And how could we create a common experience, no matter how different our opinions might be, no matter how different our personal, professional paths may be, but what could be some commonalities that we could intentionally create for one another? I have a few ideas, but I'm willing to hear everybody else's ideas, right? There's a multitude of ways a culture or a country could approach that.
Yeah. Again, if you're watching this, and we've been posting the link, what we're asking you is actually not just to sit there and comment, but we would love to have you come on camera. You know, this is, don't feel obligated, but we'd love to have you. If we can get through this episode, just the two of us guys, that'd be boring. But we would love to have you to kind of spice things up a little bit. But I think that just the basic humanity, that's a question I ask of people. I say, just think it doesn't matter where you come from. Imagine we're all under, I guess we are, under threat of a common enemy right now, and we can't even come together under that. People are expressing their so-called expertise, their knowledge from whatever perspective they've come from, and put it through a political lens. And I think that's the thing that's scary, is because even, you think back at war times, and thank goodness we have, we live in one of the we live in the most peaceful period that human history has ever had. No matter what goes on, it's a proven fact. I mean, but even that in that peace, we seem to have forgotten the threats, the common threats when they come against us, and our ability to pull together as human beings to meet those threats. And now we're seeing the results of it in certain countries where the community has not been able to really come around as a group and fight it head on with all its might. Because I think those countries would have been in a better place. Just has been demonstrated in places where a community has, under the banner of its leader, come through and been able to deal with it in a very direct way. So that I'm just talking about, the start for me would be the basic humanity, understanding that your neighbor is your neighbor. They are human, flesh and blood, and they deserve respect for their humanness. And if you can just put aside these, I mean, some of the comments, as you're watching the feed I'm just thinking, what do these people do with their lives every day that they see the need to be so vitriolic? I really do feel for them. Someone, posted today and wished Donald Trump good weather in Florida, and I said, I think he's left a stain on this country. And I hope that the fresh sunshine helps cleanse that stain from him. And even the darkest hearts deserve some light, right? That every dark heart deserves light.
I truly agree, and I'm not going to defend anyone's unprofessional actions, but I'm sure there is some trauma in everyone's lives that can cause behaviors that are not always welcome by everybody around them. Now, I'm going to pose a few, for some it may be provocative ideas, and because you mentioned, and thank you, Samira, for that comment. Yes, I fully agree that, especially in our profession, we are called yet again to help people connect. I truly agree with that statement. Thank you for chiming in, Samira. Brett, you said the threats, and the word threat resonated with me. Now, I think the guardrails have held, yes, and yet there were lots of threats for it to break. And the threats, I think, if we're talking about skin in the game as a society, is to jointly defend our system against these threats. And I'm not talking about an external threat. I think, especially if we look at U.S. history, the biggest threats to the country in its existence have always come from the inside. So we're looking at the biggest threat at the country's unity, obviously, was the Civil War some 150, 60 years ago. And we're still seeing these threats coming from the inside. And some would argue, and I'm not a political pundit by no means, but the biggest domestic issues this incoming administration is dealing with is obviously the pandemic and the economic recovery of some sorts, and then dealing with the social and racial, ethnic inequality in this country. I think these probably are the three most pressing big ticket items we have to deal with, and these are most of it are internal threats. Now, I come from a country that failed to defend itself against these threats that came from the inside, and eventually the outside pressures let Germany collapse. Now, here's where I would hope to find some sympathy for an idea. What my country did after the collapse was to find unity in showing remorse and systematizing, in a way, the response to that threat, the response to that pain. And I'm not saying we need to face our pain constantly as a culture, as a society, but unless US culture is ready to face the demons will persist, right? So it's unlikely for them to simply go away. And I think there are some ways to do this. I think getting skin in the game, getting full collaboration, full buy-in from everyone in society would be to make mandatory, to a certain degree, a civic involvement. This could happen during school-age years, and this could happen right after high school graduation. Make some sort of time frame mandatory for every citizen to contribute in something that serves the common good, regardless of political affiliation, regardless of opinion, simply a service to the country, which will benefit everyone. And this could be something like, I don't know, have a mandatory civic service in one of the national parks, cleanup, maintenance, whatever. Could be going to a nursing home, to hospitals, to emergency medical care facilities, to Veterans Affairs offices. Could be to go to, I mean, I want to bring in an example from the country of Austria, where people have the option whether they want to conscript for the military, or if they opt out of that, they can do a service for a Holocaust memorial site. Now, if you remember, Austria and Germany were the two countries predominantly responsible for the systematic or the attempt at eradicating Judaism, killing 6 million Jews. I'm not saying the US is anywhere near that development, but we've seen the guardrails bent and rattled and almost broken, and we've seen the ugly heads of fascism and xenophobia and white supremacy rise. So why not make it mandatory for every high school student to visit a Holocaust museum, to visit a site of slavery, to visit a Native American reservation, to be confronted with the country's history, to be confronted with the threats and the pain points, and learn. For some, this may be a radical approach. I'm posting it there. Tell me how you feel about this.
Well, if you have somebody in the insurrection that wearing a Camp Auschwitz sweatshirt or whatever, you see that hatred for that group still exists in some people. In fact, and they never visited. I've visited the place. You know, I'm pretty sure if that person was handheld through that place, wouldn't, I mean, it'd be pretty hard for them not to change their views on just what impact them displaying that kind of paraphernalia on their body has done. And so it's just, and you mentioned Austria, and of course our good friend Christina here mentions a great speech by an Austrian, Arnold Schwarzenegger, who mentioned this, right? Yeah. And you know, in that speech, it was a wonderful kind of monologue where he mentioned the history and watching his father deal with that trauma and expressing it with violence, you know, and so that's where I would love to see people just check themselves and just say, I can go down that road too if I let myself be so tied up with the violence, with the future legacy that they're going to feel from the violence that they've tried to or attempted to inflict on this country. So that is, it's a lot smaller part of the community, but I look at those people and I think surely there's going to be a day when they're going to think they're going to reckon with that.
Maybe they won't. Maybe they will spend their days cemented in their misguided ideas of what humankind should be like. And I think this is, I would hope so, is a small fraction of idiocy that we are still experiencing. But I think there is a lot of people, especially in the United States, in our country here, that are not always intimately familiar with the country's history, with the nuances of it. And forgive me if I'm being super blunt and maybe a bit crass in my language, but unless we own our shit, nothing changes. We need, as a country, to look in the face of the stain. And it may not be the stain that we produced ourselves, but maybe somebody did, right? Or somebody in our past did.
It splatters.
Right.
It affects all of us. It affects all of us. And Esther here, who says excellent ideas, and of course, speaking as an Austrian Jew who lived in Israel, right? These are the people that we see, and thank you, Esther, for joining. These are the people in our community, is that they see these things happen, and it is visceral. It is a visceral, and I cannot even try to imagine the feeling because I've lived such a privileged life, but I can just listen to the likes of Esther and these that tell these stories of the historical effects and impacts that the dangers of what we're seeing go on here. So we've got our first guest. Look, somebody's popping in.
Well, excellent. Let them connect their video and audio, and we'll bring them in.
Absolutely.
Now, I think aside from, and forgive me, this is a very German perspective, obviously, right? And Esther, thank you for weighing in here. Yes, it was mandatory for me growing up to visit a concentration camp. So for me, it was a full body experience that left me moved. I could come up with lots more words, and if I go down the memory trail of that experience, I would have to turn the camera off because it was so mind-shattering. And it's not pleasant. It's not pleasant to look in the eyes of the evil that is within all of us. And the evil was allowed to get some fresh air in the last 4 years. So unless we wanted to come back again, I think we want to educate ourselves. We want to face those demons. And I would say, and this is again a very European way of looking at it, once every student, every high school, middle school, elementary school student in the United States is exposed to foreign language learning, to getting a different perspective, and maybe so pandemic will allow us in some future time to actually travel again without a lot of restrictions, experiencing other cultures in order to broaden our own minds. I think that would be a lovely thing to make, I don't want to say mandatory, but to foster and encourage, and which hasn't been a thing in this country at the level that I'd like to see.
Absolutely. Or maybe we'll add Sue here to the stream. Maybe can we hear you, Sue? We can't see you, but we can hear you. Maybe that would. No.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me. Oh, good. Hey, hi! Happy Inauguration Day! Woohoo!
Yay! Hi, Sue. How are you today?
Yay! Sorry, I'm better than I was yesterday. It's getting better, slowly better, but bit by bit. And thank you for addressing this theme of change and transition.
So, Sue, what do you think would be ways for this country to move from its division to more unitedness? What could be some approaches to cultural change that you could envision for the United States?
This is a good question, and if I could solve it, maybe I would be the one who was sworn in today.
It's not too late, Sue. You can run for office. I mean, you can. Neither of us can.
Yes, we can. Yeah, I've been really thinking a lot about that. That I think it really helps. I mean, for example, today, just the visual of a much more inclusive ceremony, and you had people of visible different races and visible, and that they used sign for the Pledge of Allegiance. That there were people who were, different abilities, different, both of the parties, just sort of seeing people together and talking about it, I think is a important first step. But of course, action has to come next. And I don't have there's no quick solution, but I think starting with understanding that, okay, this is where we are, and getting people on the same page about this is where we start from.
Yeah, and I think that's true. So what we've seen some great speeches in history, and perhaps perhaps the people, as I said, that were commenting on a thread that I watched as Joe Biden was making his speech. Maybe we've just become accustomed to these. We're just immune to the high oratory reachings of the leaders or the representatives we put up there. Even back to the days of Martin Luther King, we just celebrated him this past Monday, and that great speech goes down in history. But if you look back, the ideals of what he said have not really, a lot of them have not come to fruition. So, you're right. I think words are words. They're great, and words need to keep being said. But there really is some action, and that's why I think I agree with Christian what he said earlier, is that we can't just kind of rest on the laurels and say, well, it's a great new day, let's just go about our life and things are just going to go back to what we term as normal. No, I mean, there are always failings in the current leadership and what will come before us. So we still need to keep their feet to the fire. Wouldn't you agree, Sue?
Oh, I would agree that in fact, it's interesting. I was very glad to see that the first tweet that President Joe Biden put up was one about, okay, I'm going to get into the office and I'm going to get down to work. So he's planning to get to work, and kind of this challenge of, what are you going to do? And there were a lot of comments that, tweets that came after that about, can you work on this? Can you do that? So people are trying to get engaged in a different way, I hope, that's one good result of the weird last 4 years, is that people see that social media has power and they can engage in many different ways. You don't have to physically be there, but it helps to show up and it helps to be visible. So I'm hopeful, and I really appreciated the poem that was given today too. Kind of a call for, as we go forward.
I agree. It was a beautiful poem that left me speechless. I have to admit, bright young lady.
Absolutely, and it really, it just shows you. Look, again, you think about the youth, right? And that girl was 22 or 23. I mean, that's a pretty big stage. She did not miss a beat. She did a lot of it from memory, you know. It was just amazing. And again, as a woman of color, it is just beyond my comprehension how a woman of color and people, it's like I've said this about people who go and defend this country with, in the army and things like that, that the people of color and people of different backgrounds still do this, believing in a country that ostensibly still doesn't believe in them. And so for her to be able to get up there and knowing what's going on in this country and still be able to have the faith in it and write something like that from her heart, something I'll never be able to match or even understand what it takes to do. That's just my personal comment on that.
Also, I appreciate that J-Lo gave her a whole little bit in there in Spanish. There was like different appeal to different, the kind of appreciating that there is a difference in diversity, and honestly, having Garth Brooks, so let's appeal to another segment of the that where that's popular. I think there's something to be said for that visual on representation and the intention of representation, intention of unity, but it's not going to be easy work. What do you guys think we can do in our space of bridging? It feels hard to bridge because, of course, we want accountability before we actually have unity. So I'm really deeply thinking about that question.
I think we can have both. And again, I'm really coming from my country's experience. If you remember the Nuremberg trials, there was accountability. Right. And there was also the olive branches to those with minor infractions, and the country would have not been able to be rebuilt without those who loaded guilt upon themselves during an ill-fated regime. And I'm not making those comparisons lightly. I think we need to include those who fell victim to ideas that almost collapse our guardrails, and to those who are watching or refuse to watch a talking head like me ramble about this, who feel they had something taken away from them. I think it would be helpful to look at what happened before the inauguration, where there was a church service taking place that then President-elect Joe Biden and his new administrative team attended together with people like Mitch McConnell, with people from the other side of the aisle. So for those of you who believe that it was your God-given president that just left the office, or who believe that this incoming new administration is ungodly, or whatever your belief system may have you think about the religious implication of political leadership, I think it would be worth looking at the fact that this new administration started out with a reaching across the aisle and a demonstration of spirituality. And I'm saying this with the caveat that I firmly believe that God and government don't mix, and that this was a symbolic act. It can be an act that could be a precursor for other reconciliatory measures that we'll see in the next couple of years.
Yep. Again,
I'm really glad you said that, because
Sorry, Sue, just to reset
Go
just
ahead.
quickly, I just wanted to mention that if you're watching, and again, as Sue has done, you just click on the link that we've put in the comments and navigate your way into the green room in the back, and you will be placed in the queue, and we can go forward doing that. And thank you, Sue. So I just wanted to say that.
Sure. Thank you, and thanks for having this interesting platform to use too. Technology is really important, as so many people mentioned it, especially afterwards. That if not for technology, I was wondering how many billions of people might have witnessed today's events. But going back to your point, Christian, about thank you for putting that post up of the poet laureate. If there is always light if we only were brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it. Yes. And the light, as you were mentioning in the morning, when people went to the church service, I believe it was held at the same time as the send-off for the former president. And it seems to me that some people made that choice. I'm not sure if maybe I'm making that up, but in some way, but I'm pretty sure that that's what happened. And that's, it's a choice. And I think that that's true for everything we do in every moment that we're in, everything going forward. There's always a choice, and we can choose something that will be forwarding. We can choose something that will be bridging. We can choose to listen rather than yell. So let's make some good choices.
I agree.
Yep.
Thank you, Sue, for joining us. We're open in the green room, so if you want to join as well, you see the link here posted in the comments, and you also see it in the chat box underneath. Feel free to hop on that link, and we'll have you on here. There's no magic sauce. This is technology. We can make it work for you as well. And if you want to continue joining us through the comments or back channel communication, that is fine as well. Thank you, Sue. Have a wonderful day. Ciao, ciao to the West Coast.
Thank you so much. I just exit and let somebody else come in?
Yes, we'll guide you gently out. Make sure you grab one of those blue M&Ms in the green room.
Yeah, get a blue M&M.
Oh, yay. Thank you. Love blue M&Ms.
Thank you.
All right, take care.
Right.
Thanks so much, you guys. Really appreciate it.
We have Christina, who said she. I'm going to assume that she said you visited Poland. When you visited Poland, you went and saw the camps. Yes, I mean, it was something that I did. For those that don't know, I had the good fortune of marrying a Polish girl, and it was one of the things that I did actually the first time when my parents visited Poland. We made we did it together as a family. So, but it was very impactful for me as somebody who is now connected to that culture, to part of the learning of the history and to see it. I mean, I just really can never explain to people what it does to you. It's something that I'll definitely do. I'll ensure that our daughter does it, because it will be one of. I'm pretty sure it'll be one of the most impactful things for her. She's a bit of a history buff like Dad, and likes to read about the war and Poland's part in it, crucial part in it, really, at the start of it anyway. So I think it was it's a place, or it's more than just a place. It's an experience that Will, as Christian said, who has gone through it as well, which fundamentally does give you a bit of a reset, bit of a kick in the guts, to say, just to really realize how much privilege you have, And I would encourage that, there's possibilities to do this in this country as well, in the US. I mean, to visit places of history where the indigenous population here has gone through their own holocausts of sorts, right? And to go to those places. You don't have to go to Poland and experience these. Can be experienced in your own backyard. Yes. And to learn the history and to really understand the impact and the trauma that has been placed in the psyche of the people that survive, the families, the descendants that survived that. That's and slavery as well, right?
I have an interesting example. I think it's interesting. So I used to live in an area on the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains for many years, and we had close access to one of the rivers that are great for rafting. In fact, it's the Ocoee River that you'll find in southeast Tennessee and close to North Carolina and Georgia. And it is what if any one of you has seen the movie Deliverance, that's that kind of landscape, that kind of country. And it also, more importantly, is the natural territory, the former territory of the Cherokee Nation, one of the many Native American peoples of North America. And there is good business every summer in the rafting industry. It's outdoors, people go there, they hop on a raft, go down the river, have tons of fun, enjoy nature. It's a really wholesome, great experience. I would encourage you, if you have the ability and the pandemic allowing, if you ever do that, you'll enjoy that day. To me, it also took on a different meaning, because living there, going down that river, it's not only the experience of nature and the camaraderie and the cold water splashing and the sun shining. For me, it's always a reminder, this used to be Cherokee land. This is where the ancestors of this land went hunting, educated their children, created their culture and society, and very little of that is left. So I think the fact that there is no tourism going to the memory of the Cherokee people in that part of the country, but a lot of tourism going to enjoyment, entertainment, outdoor experience, that tells a little bit of that story. And I'm not making the entertainment fun part wrong. That is great. Right. That's a great activity to have. What I'm missing is the balance. You can go, if you so choose, you can go to a place called Cherokee, North Carolina, just on the other side of the state line, where you can visit a semi-autonomous county, if it was Cherokee County, North Carolina, where the Cherokee who chose not to be ethnically cleansed into Oklahoma, where they remained and try to cultivate or rescue what's left of their cultural identity. You can visit that, yes, and I would encourage you to do so. But that's a flash in the pan compared to how US culture has co-opted the very sites and the very traditions and the very history of the natives in this country. And you can make that same equivalence. You can tell the same story of places that were once the sites of the cruelty of human exploitation via slavery. There is a lot of tourism going to the plantations where you can admire the architecture and the beauty of the antebellum South. There is not enough remembrance on the pain points that this created, the pain that has been perpetuated from generation to generation that we still can experience today. So this may be uncomfortable for some of you, and I'll repeat myself what I said earlier. Unless we own our shit, nothing will change.
Yeah.
We need to look at that.
Yeah. And I posed a question on LinkedIn about to our European community or our global community. It was in a group in Europe, not that I was just concentrating in Europe, but it is a question that needs to be posed to the global community. How do they see the impact, because it's a very influential country in the US, the impact of the actions that go on here and what they see from the outside, where there are true experience and history of what effects that such ignorance can have on a country, and then probably the frustration. And I'm talking about as a business person now, right? If you just look at this through a purely business lens, how do you kind of have engagement with the rest of the world that's looking at the US and thinking, why can't, the rest of the world saying, we've gone through this before. Why can't you learn from our mistakes? Why go through it yourself? What is it about you need to have this terror exist and ferment within your borders when you have the evidence of its failure right here inside of our country? And right, they're coming at from the fact that saying we've owned our shit. And so you can own it too, because we're not saying we want to throw it at you. We want you to smell it and have a distaste for it, because it's not fun. It never has been, and it's always failed. It's always failed, but it's gone through. It's had an ascension, just like we've had in this country in the last 4 years. It's had its day in the sun, but now it always fails, and that's a sad thing if you're not learning from those experiences.
I want to pick up on that question that Sue asked earlier. So how do we bridge? And I mean, for some, it might be an overused metaphor. And for us in this industry, in our business, in our line of work, we gregariously offer to be the bridge builders, right? And yet we ask ourselves, how do we bridge? How do we make it united instead of divided? And I don't have the simple answer for that either. I'm asking all of you who are watching, I'm asking you, Brett, what could be some ideas to begin the healing process? And the healing process hasn't been started yet. We simply had a change of guard. That doesn't mean that we will heal during the next 4 years. Far from it, because no administration, no president, no Democrat, no Republican, no political leadership figure or team in and by itself can facilitate the healing process. It starts with us.
Yeah.
Unless we're all involved in this, and if we want to heal, then it ain't gonna happen.
Yeah, that's a frustrating thing for me to listen to people say, well, Bush did nothing for the country, and Obama did nothing for the country, and through the lens of saying, well, what were you doing for yourself while these periods were going on? I mean, my business has thrived under both types of administration. I haven't sat around waiting for the president to fix my problems. I mean, I don't think it's about that. So it's a frustrating thing to see people, now we can get something done. Well, again, my business has thrived in the last 4 years too. I didn't wait around, for the president to fix my problems. So that's where I think that taking self-responsibility, and again, this is a country that celebrates self-reliance, right? Individuality, that positive part of individuality. And when you've got the means and you've got the privilege to actually do something positive, then do it. Don't sit around blaming the black president that was in for 8 years and saying, well, that was a gap in where I couldn't do anything. You had everything that you were able to do. You lost nothing. And so again, that's a frustrating thing for me. I will get a little bit emotional about that.
No, and I agree with you. And it's the blame game never worked. I remember my grandmother, who would be 100 years old now, where she's still alive. She always said, if you point fingers at somebody, there's at least 3 fingers pointing back at yourself.
Right. That's a good one. That one.
And I agree with Sue, who says, let's start healing with celebration together. And I would pick up on that and say, let's celebrate each other, right? Let's celebrate even those that we don't agree with. Let's celebrate their progress, whatever that may look like for them. Somebody in the Rust Belt getting a new job, having been disgruntled and frustrated for years, and having voted for the false promise of make America great again. Let's celebrate all the successes that we have across any opinion, across any political divide. Let's revel in each other's progress, in each other's success, instead of pointing blame and pigeonholing and what's the other word? Guinea pigging, I guess.
Any
animals.
type of small mammal will do.
Mumbating.
Absolutely. Well, well, I don't know. Shall we wind it up? Shall we try this again? I mean, this is again, for those who are watching, Sue came on and joined us. Sue was actually a past guest on our show, but came and joined us, and we are very, very grateful for that. We're grateful for you if you're watching this now or in the future. We are not restricting this to just now. We want your comments, we want your questions, we want your insights, your valued insights, because we are here to the people ask us why we do this particular show, right? And is there a set goal? Well, I don't know. We didn't start out with a set goal. We basically just are learners, and we realize that if we put it out there in public, we're going to learn probably more than we could ever, expend in terms of our knowledge. But the experience of what we've both gone through gives us a certain perspective, but that's not the right perspective. It is just a different perspective, and we need everybody's voice.
True. And I think that is an experiment we can continue in the future on select topics where we invite you live, impromptu, in the moment. So we want you to be spontaneous with us and be courageous and get your face and voice into the studio. You don't have to travel, only to your computer and to the closest reliable internet connection. And otherwise, send us a message. You see the ways to connect with us here on the scroll bar on the bottom. Follow the YouTube or subscribe to the YouTube channels. Follow us on Facebook. Connect with us on LinkedIn. Join in the conversation and enjoy the conversation like Esther did. She think it was great. Thank you for watching, Esther.
Thank you for the great input, Esther, and sharing. I mentioned before Clubhouse. It's a new app. I just want to. We're going to kind of take these kind of discussions to more of the audio, the just pure audio platform, and that is a platform called Clubhouse. We're going to have one next week on the 27th. Actually, it'll be 10 a.m. Pacific time, 12 p.m. Central, and 1 p.m. Eastern here in the US. And I've just got the link here, so I'm going to post that in the comments. Maybe that'll show up in some way.
For those of you who haven't picked up on that buzz yet, it's not like we've known this for a long time. We're latecomers as well. So apparently Clubhouse for now is only for users of products made by the Cupertino company. So unless you have an iPhone, that's not going to work. And that's not a sales pitch to change your phone, but that's unfortunately the technological limitation for that. And you need to be invited. So if you have an iPhone and you're in good standing with Brett or myself, you might be able to ask us for an invite. And it will be a different format, obviously, because there's no video, and it's not going to be us talking to you through this channel. It's probably going to be more of an organic fireside chat, I guess, through digital means. So join us in that experiment as well. We're all about exploring new opportunities and bridging in any way possible and available to us.
Yeah, I think my experience so far, having spent, I went down a rabbit hole last night. It was a great rabbit hole. I mean, we've got with actually a guest that's coming on next week who is, I would say, probably in terms of social media influencers, one of the biggest here in the US. And so we're going to have him on next week, and he was on this last night, and it was and we both together were presenting and talking in amongst the crew. And I think it was just there's a lot of people commenting on just how enriching this experience is. Just basically like being on a group call. It is basically that. You can comment, you can just listen. And I thought it was really, I'm really enjoying it, just as again, we're not we're not selling it. We don't get any, it doesn't cost you anything. But it's just, to me, for now, I'm feeling it's actually a pretty good platform, a different platform than this, obviously. But it's whatever your interests are, right? Whatever your interest in whether it's intercultural work or what, whatever your interests are, you're going to find a community in there that you can be a part of. And I found one on travel, for example. It's great, sustainable travel, something that I want to learn more about as somebody who, when we get back to travel, want to do this in a sustainable way. So that was just something I thought, wow, interesting. I've found all these people with these great ideas, and they invite me to give me my ideas. And so just as we've done today, that's what our intentions are here. So I will shut my mouth now because I can ramble a little bit. I'm just excited about it. That's all. When I get excited, I talk a lot.
All right. So let's bring this to a conclusion today. This was probably the longest episode we've done so far. I wonder if they've kicked us out on Facebook or YouTube or LinkedIn yet. I think we went over time. Either way,
give us a chance. Give us a chance.
Yes. Thank you for all your contributions. Thanks for watching. Thanks for commenting. And as you're watching this at a later point in time and not live as it happens right now, we welcome you as well. Make sure you get in touch with us. How you can do that, you see on the scroll bar here below, and follow the links. It's not that hard. If you found this, you know how to do it. And this was Two Chaps, Many Cultures on January 20th, episode 138. Can you believe it?
I can.
All right. Thank you very much. We'll see you again tomorrow. New guest, new topic. Be there.
See you then. Bye.